one of the most important part of what we're doing here this week is to hear from our emerging leaders. So we have 5 outstanding emerging leaders that are going to make 1-minute pitches to you. We'll get started with Tamika Hill from Jamaica, Nora Alsh from Morocco, Jessica Berlin from Germany, Richard Setri from the Ivory Coast, Christian Botan from Romania. Do the superpowers really care about Africa?
Well, it's a totally fair question, and I want to jump in on that. I first just want to give a shout out to all of GMF's friends at the OCP Policy Center for taking Atlantic Dialogues forward. It's just been so wonderful to see how impressive the forum is, and it's great to be a part of it.
Well, I like to define Africa as a superpower to be. It's happening in Africa. A lot of great things are happening. This is the continent that is making the highest economic growth. Okay, we have issues, it has to be better chaired, but it's here.
I think China has a tremendous interest in Africa for a long time. This is not first time China in Africa. We were there since 60s, 70s, but at that point, if you recall, for different reasons, the Chinese are very much interested in exporting a radicalized idea of global revolution. So we basically provide the free aid at that point.
African responsibility is African responsibility, and this is something that allows a partnership, a real partnership, not a fake one. Europe has this issue of migration, but we have the great interest in the development of Africa and in these infrastructure projects.
What's the view from the Mediterranean?
I'm speaking today as an African. I'm Moroccan. I am African. So I'm not talking about Africa as an external person, but I'm talking as an African, talking about his continent and the future of our lives.
What's the best energy mix to accelerate Africa's development?
For me, the best energy mix for Africa is an energy mix that addresses climate change without hurting prospects for growth.
It's clear that without a solid energy development, there cannot be any sort of social, economic, quick progress in the continent.
The latest experience with solar power, with PV, is we have at least 3 locations in the world, in Chile, in Mexico, and in Saudi Arabia, where solar power costs less than 2 US cents per kilowatt hour.
The work is so big that we need mixed energy. Not everybody can do it. One group can do it at once. We need wind, as you said. In West Africa, we got a lot of it. We need gas, even though sometimes many arguments come out to talk about how clean and unclean it is. And we can leapfrog, as you said, into what was done in other countries and other places in the world to learn from their mistakes and bring home the best practices.
We start off in a period of more closed integration, I think, as we've seen in parts in Africa as well. Integration for the sake of trying to promote a model of import substitution, industrialization, and by closing economies through regional integration, economies were able to see that they could better produce final goods.
But what is important is if you want to really go for integration, and if one goes back to definitions, again, what Jason talked about. Integration without institutions, up to a point, yes, but only up to a point, and that's maybe more cooperation than integration. Cooperation arrangements you can have with fairly weak institutions and even no institutions. Once you start moving into true integration, for example, a monetary union, it's difficult to run a monetary union without institutions. Sure. So one needs there to gradually to build that framework up.
The World welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Atlantic Dialogue's plenary session on financing infrastructure. Time for a big push in Africa. So we're going to kind of focus on the big push.
The issue is the private sector is there. It's there in a big way, but not at scale to invest in the needs and the demands of infrastructure in Africa.
Part of the answer is related to one very obvious innovation. This very obvious innovation is attracting the private sector. But for you to attract the private sector, you have to have bankable projects.
When China has started to invest in Africa and in a massive, in massive standards, then it has greatly improved the attractivity of Africa. And then everybody has discovered that Africa was attractive.
We look at the idea of soft public-private partnerships, which is not something I can say the World Bank loves that we talk about, but I will say it is an amazing opportunity to think about how you can change the way governments operate and function and change the level of transparency that exists.